this great town or make journeys into the country are often saddened by the sight of female beggars crowding the roads and doors of houses. They're often followed by 3 to 6 children, all dressed in rags, and all begging for money from every passerby. These mothers, instead of making money through honest work, have to spend all their time begging for money to support their helpless children. When those children grow up, they become thieves because they cannot get work, or they leave their dear country for other countries, or they sell themselves in slavery. I think everyone agrees that having so many children being carried around by or following their mothers and frequently their fathers is a very great additional burden on the kingdom at this very difficult time. So anyone who could think of a fair, cheap, and easy plan whereby these children could become useful members of society would deserve so much of a thanks from the public that he should have a statue put up as somebody who saved the nation. But I'm not thinking just about the children of those who are confirmed beggars. I'm looking at a far bigger picture and thinking about all those children of a certain age whose parents are just as unable to support them as those people who are actually begging in the streets. Speaking for myself and having thought about this for many years, I have assessed many other schemes to put forward to solve the problem. I've always thought that their calculations are flawed. It is true that a newborn child can be supported by its mother's milk for a whole year with hardly any food. It doesn't need more than a couple shillings worth of food, which the mother can certainly get by begging, either the money or the scraps worth the same amount. When they reach a year old, I propose that we deal with them in such a way that instead of being a burden on their parents or the funds of the parish, or demanding to be fed and clothed for the rest of their lives, we'll provide food and some clothing to many thousands of people. There is also another great benefit to my scheme. It will stop those elective abortions and the horrible practice of women murdering their illegitimate children, which is sadly all too common. They sacrifice their poor innocent babies for reasons of expense than shame. And this would make the wickedest, most inhuman person weep and feel pity. It is generally calculated that there are around 1.5 million people in this country, of whom I reckon are about 200,000 couples in which the wives will be breeding. I will take away from this 30,000 who are capable of supporting their own children, although it might be a generous figure given the poverty in our country at the moment, which leaves 170,000 who are breeding. I will subtract from that figure 50,000 to account for the women who have miscarriages, or those children, or whose children die in accidents of disease before they reach a year old. That leaves us 120,000 children born to the parents of poor people each year. So the question is, how will we bring up and feed and clothe this number of people? As I've stated already, in the state of our country at the moment, it is utterly impossible to do so. Via all the solutions that have been proposed so far, we can't give them jobs as craftsmen or agriculture workers, and there is no house building going on in the country at the moment, and we're not growing any food. Until they get to 6 years old, they can't usually make a living by stealing, unless they are very advanced. Although I must admit they pick up the basics much earlier. However, during that time, they can only really be seen as apprentices. I was told by a great man in the country that he had only ever heard of 2 examples of children under the age of 6 making a living through thieving. And he lived in a part of the country where the children were famous for picking up the trade extremely quickly. Our merchants assure me that a boy or a girl under 12 years old is useless in the terms of being sold. And even when they get to this age, one can't be more than 3 pounds for them, or 3.5 pounds of a crown at best. This won't show a profit for either the parents or our country, as they have consumed at least 4 times that value in food and clothes by then. So, I will put forward my own ideas, which I hope nobody will take any exception. I have been told by a very intelligent American, whom I know in our country, that a young, healthy child, which has been well fed, is, when it reaches a year old, a very delicious, nourishing, healthy food. Whether you eat it stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled, I have no doubt that it will also work well in a stew. So I humbly put forward the idea of these 120,000 children, that we should keep 20,000 reserved for breeding, with only a quarter of them being males. This is more than the proportion we keep for sheep, than what we keep for black cattle or pigs. And my logic is that these children are not usually born to married parents. Our savage people in this country don't seem to care about marriage, and so one male will be enough to mate with 4 females. I propose that the 100,000 who are left should be offered for sale at the age of 1 year old to rich and noble people throughout our country. The mother should always be advised to let them get plenty of milk in their last month of being alive, so that they will become plump and fat, ready for the table. A child has enough meat on it to make 2 dishes when entertaining friends, and when a family is eating alone, either the front or the back quarters will make a decent meal. And when the little pepper salt is added to it, to last through to a 4th day, when it will be very good boiled, especially in the winter. I've worked out the average, which is that a newborn child will weigh around 12 pounds, and over the course of a year, if fed reasonably well, will grow to 28 pounds. I must admit that this food will be rather expensive, so it would be very good for the landlords, as they have already gobbled up most of the parents. They would seem to have the best right to the children. The flesh of children will be in season all year round, but there will be more of it in March. And a little before and afterwards, we're told by a distinguished author, an eminent French doctor, that because fish is very fertile diet, more children are born in Roman Catholic countries 9 months after Lent. This means that there will be more meat on the market than usual at this time, because at least 3/4 of the children in this country are Catholic. So my proposal will have an additional advantage of cutting down the number of Catholics. I've already mentioned that the cost of bringing up a child of a beggar is being about 2 shillings a year, including the rags for their children. I don't think any gentleman would be unwilling to pay 10 shillings for a body of good fat child, which, as I said, will do for 4 very nourishing meals if he is only dining with a friend or his own family. So a squire will have a good reason to be a good landlord. He will become popular for his tenants, and the mother will make a clear profit of 8 shillings and be able to work until she has her next child. Those people who have to watch the pennies, which I must admit most people do nowadays, can skin the carcass. Once the skin has been treated, it will make excellent gloves for the ladies and the summer boots for the gentlemen of quality. As for our country, we can set up slaughterhouses for this purpose in the most suitable areas, and we can be sure that plenty of people will be willing to be butchers. However, I would be inclined to recommend that children be purchased alive and prepared for eating straight after slaughter, which we do with roast pigs. A very noble person, a true patriot whom I greatly admire, recently when we were talking about this, put forward an improvement to my idea. He said that as many gentlemen in this country have recently killed all their deer, he thought that the lack of venison could be made up with the bodies of young boys and girls, no older than 14 and no younger than 12. There were so many boys and girls in every country who were starving because of lack of work. If their parents were alive, then they should slaughter them. Otherwise, their closest relations could do it. But with all respect for my excellent friend, such a fine patriot, I can't completely agree with him. My American friend has told me that their flesh is generally tough and lean, like that of our schoolboys, due to their continual exercise. He said that they do not taste good, and that fattening them up wouldn't make any difference. As for the girls, with all due respect, I think they would be a loss to the public because soon they would start breeding themselves. Besides, it's quite possible that some rather fussy people might say, wrongly, that doing this could be seen as rather cruel. I admit that this has been my biggest worry. However well-intentioned the project is. However, my excuse, to excuse my friend, he admitted that the idea had been put to his head by a famous native of Formosa, who came from here to our country over 20 years ago. He was talking to my friend, who told him that in his country, when any young person was executed, the executioner sold the body to the upper-class people as a delicacy. During his time there, a plump girl of 15, who was crucified for trying to poison the emperor, was cut up into joints and sold to the prime minister of the country and other high-placed people from the court, making an overall profit of 400 crowns. And I must say that if the same thing was being done with a certain plump young girls in this town who don't have a penny to their names and yet won't go anywhere without hiring a sedan chair, and who show up at the theater and the parties in foreign clothes, which they will never pay for, the country wouldn't be any worse off. Now, some pessimistic people have raised concerns about what should be done with the great number of poor people who are old, diseased, or maimed. I have given much thought to what should be done to relieve the nation of this burden, but this particular matter does not bother me in the slightest, because it's quite obvious that they are dying every day, rotting away through cold, famine, filth, and vermin as quickly as we can hope for. As for the younger laborers, they're almost in the same desirable state. They can't get work, and so they are dying from a lack of nourishment to such an extent that if they ever do happen to have a job, they are not even strong enough to carry it out. So they and the country are not going to be bothered by their presence for very long. I've wandered away from my subject for far too long, so now I'll get back to it. I think the advantages of what I have proposed are obvious and numerous, and also extremely important. First, I've already said, it would greatly cut down the numbers of Catholics. They're becoming more numerous year by year, as they are the people in this country who read the most. They are our most dangerous enemies, and they have stayed in the country in order to hand it to the dictators. They hope to take advantage of the absence of so many good people in our country who've decided to abandon their country rather than remain here and pay taxes to a church they don't even believe in. Secondly, this proposal will give poor people a valuable piece of property. when they have or when they fall behind in their rent, and their landlord will be able to seize it and make up arrears. We know that their corn and their cattle have already been seized. They never have any money. Thirdly, looking after 100,000 children from the age of 2 upwards will cost at least 10 shillings per carcass a year. And the value of property in the nation will go up by £50,000 per annum. And we will also have the benefit of a very new food stock for the tables of all discerning wealthy gentlemen in the country, as we will be growing and processing this product ourselves. We will benefit by keeping the money in our country.